everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning, and welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. We've got a great show for you today. The perpetuation of second-class citizenship in the United States. The title for today is a little bit of an edit of a quote by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In Puerto Rico, we continue to see the perpetuation of second-class citizenship in the United States. She said this in an interview back in 2018 having to do with the hurricane that devastated Puerto Rico in 2018. Well, guess what, folks? Another hurricane season, another devastation of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico didn't get hit quite as badly by the most recent hurricane. It was developing into a Category 1 hurricane when it hit the island, and it was on the outer bands of the hurricane when it crossed the island. There were areas of Puerto Rico that saw up to 30 inches of rain per hour. Some that saw up to 3 and 4 feet of rain across a day. That's a lot of rain. No place is really designed to handle 3 or 4 feet of water falling on it. And so There was plenty of damage, plenty of power outages, things like that. And it's a problem. It's a problem that occurs all over the Caribbean, all over island nations worldwide. But even further, not just island nations any longer, because we've had reports recently of flooding and severe storm damage in places like Italy and France and Sweden. Um, Places are just getting deluged with climate change. And I was listening to a climate scientist recently, and I mean, like, these folks have been studying this stuff for decades, most of them, and they're really pulling no punches. There's literally nothing that we can do to avoid the sea level rise that's already predicted by 2025, which is something like 5 inches. Um, which doesn't seem like a lot until you realize that a lot of the world is within 12 inches of mean sea level. A lot of the land that we occupy is within that range, and so a lot of the world's population is within that range. So, a rise of 5 inches is going to be detrimental to people around the world. It's going to create problems that we have to deal with as a society. And unfortunately, those problems are not going to go away quickly or easily. They're going to be like many of the problems that we deal with even today. Look forward to that, I guess. um, I want to welcome on screen our guest. We have a great guest for you this morning. Nick, welcome on screen. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, and what it is you do.
Hey, thanks, James. My name is Nick Jonczak, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'm a playwright and a producer. And I wrote a silly little musical for the Cannonball Festival called Man of La Mansion.
Man of La Manchin.
Mhm.
Please tell us a little bit about why the title Man of La Manchin.
Yeah, I have to give credit to my best friend Tony Rom, he's a reporter for the Washington Post. And when I was telling him about this show, where I wanted to write a musical about eating Joe Manchin alive, he was like, "Oh, you know what title would be great?" He said, You should call it Man of La Mansion." And I ran with it. And I started writing it actually as a 10-minute play for a festival that I was a part of back in February of this year. I'm part of a playwrights group in New York, just an informal one, and we get together a couple times a month and read some pages. And this year we decided to do a 10-minute play festival, and so I wrote the original 10-minute version of Mansion for that. And then when I and the other Cannonball producers were putting together the festival for this year, I knew I wanted to do something for Fringe, um, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do Mansion. And so I decided to turn it into an hour-long piece. And so there are 10 songs in like a 50-minute musical, and it's just a two-hander. It's just Joe Manchin and his captor, Sweetie, whose name I took from that is something I say in the description that it's not at all based on Man of La Mancha, but it's a small little bit of a lie in that in Man of La Mancha there's this character of Aldonza whose name is also Dulcinea, and so I took that name Dulcinea, which means sweet, and that is the name of the other character in the play, Sweetie. So small lie. There was a little bit of a basis off of Man of La Mancha, but not a whole lot. But yeah, it's like it's grotesque, it's gory, it's absurd, it's violent. I think it's really funny. It's a dumb, clowny kind of piece.
I mean, grotesque, absurd, violent. I mean, that's politics for you.
That's America, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's sort of I was writing an application for something recently, and it was the first time where I felt like I could really sort of put a finer point on what it is that I think I like to do or what it is that I try to do as a writer. And I think the kind of absurdity, the kind of absurd violence that's in this piece is the kind of alienating absurd violence that I see in our country, right? Uh, that happens every day to people. And I don't know that everyone is always aware of that.
Speaking of absurd violence, there's a topic I didn't put on the list because I forgot honestly when I was creating the title card. But there's a report out of Tennessee. The Tennessee Holler is an independent newspaper that reports on Tennessee, and there's an SRO, a student resource officer, who dragged a black student by the hair and then pepper sprayed him and arrested him and charged him for assault and disorderly conduct and resisting arrest at East Ridge High School. Because the student didn't want to play dodgeball in gym class.
Oh Jesus. Yeah.
And he's a teenager, so he was being mouthy about it. But like I'm sorry, I think I was pretty mouthy when I was a teenager, if I ever recall correctly. I mean, I might not have. No, I'm pretty sure I did. I'm pretty sure like I was pretty mouthy. Like I don't know, like teenagers, especially teenage boys, are just kind of like showing off constantly. So
Well, and I think too, like at that age, like you are like you're testing the limits of your own body and what it is that you can get away with, and your brain is still developing, and there are all the different kinds of pressures that you have on yourself at that age. And I think like any adult who expects, like, that person is a child, right? Like
right.
any adult who expects a child to be able to have the same kind of like capability, faculty, whatever, as an adult is just an idiot, right? Like like you can't actually expect that of a child. You can't treat a child that way. You can't treat an adult that way. Like even if someone
Right,
is gonna,
like if I'm walking down the street, or like even if I'm at an organized thing, right? And like I'm at a wedding and somebody like wants me to play a wedding game and I don't want to play it. I don't expect like, a nearby cop to come and beat me up because I don't,
well, and like how, what an awful lesson about consent too.
right?
Like that this kid, is you're like, do you want to play? No, great, you have to do it anyway. And like, and then I'm gonna punish you when you don't. Yeah, there's no, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on
You
here. I
are,
don't
you
know.
are. Yeah, no, I mean we don't have to follow FCC rules. I'm not broadcasting on national airwaves yet. So
Good. Well, that, you know what? Give it time, James.
hmm.
And but until then, I'm gonna say fuck that cop.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, like, uh, but that's the kind of like all of this is going on. Like, it doesn't it doesn't change it. I mean, like your title obviously refers to Joe Manchin. I'm saying obviously.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. But Joe Manchin, Democrat, Delaware, um,
West Virginia.
huh?
West
West
Virginia. He's
Virginia.
from West
Sorry,
Virginia. Yeah,
Democrat,
yeah,
West
yeah.
Virginia.
Mhm.
Um, Famously owns a yacht, a pretty big one. I own a yacht too, technically. Um, but like but like famously owns like a very expensive yacht. Our sailboat isn't that expensive. um,
Yeah, no, his yacht is called Almost Heaven.
yeah.
It's named after the John Denver song about West Virginia.
Hmm.
And he drives a Maserati around DC. Like he's a rich dude.
Yeah, and where all that wealth came from, because serving in Congress is not a wealth making
Mhm.
proposition. Like, I forget what the salary is currently, but I think it's like 68,000 a year or something like that.
Oh, I thought it
Um,
was more than that, but I
uh,
could be wrong. Yeah,
Congressional salary.
while you're looking that up, yeah, his money. So in 1988, he founded a company called Ener Systems, which is a waste coal brokerage company. And that family business of his has made millions and millions and millions of dollars selling waste coal from abandoned mines to a specific like factory in West Virginia that emits air pollution at a higher rate than any other plant in the state. Um, and Yeah, I could go on about him, but he's just he's just fucking awful. He like he sold the company to his son a couple of years ago, and he's in a blind trust. So he gets money from it every year, but he says that he's not involved in any of the decision making for the company, which is like just patently untrue. Um,
I mean, this is like the blind trust that Trump supposedly put his companies in.
right, Right, and he also, and the thing that's like crazy to me is Manchin is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So he literally makes money off of the deregulation of coal.
Right.
And it's just absolutely silly to me that that Congress people aren't required to divulge conflicts of interest when getting chair appointmentships. Like that's
I mean, they are supposed to. You know, there's all this ethics stuff around being a member of Congress. Not that it's well enforced. It's like I had a conversation with somebody about famously in South Philly we have a 11th Street that runs north to south in a section of South Philly that really has never had really good enforcement on parking regulations.
Mhm, mhm.
But I don't. If you're not from Philly, parking in Philly is a rare and valuable commodity. People are fighting about it constantly on all kinds of sides of the issue. I don't honestly, like I've tried to figure out where I stand on parking. I'm kind of with people in that less parking in the city is probably good for the city, um, but also with people that we do need parking. Like it's kind of hard to get around outside the city when you don't have a vehicle. Um, anyway,
Yeah, it's a real like the entire like grid, right, needs to be redone,
right,
right? Like our entire understanding of transportation and what cities are for. Are they for cars or are they for people, right? Like that and all of that needs to be rethought so we can actually make it easy, right? You're like, we need parking in the city, don't we? I'm like, not if we had different, if we actually had like reliable public transportation, or if we had walkable cities,
right,
if we weren't kicking people out of their homes and having them to move like farther and farther out, then you'd be able to have communities that actually have like both, commercial businesses and homes in them at the same time. So you can actually like live. Like, what a novel idea.
right,
And
right.
during the pandemic, when there were like parts of the neighborhood that were like where the streets were shut down, like either on the weekends or whatever, and it
Hmm.
was just the streeteries, and then cars were like weren't allowed to be on the road. It was amazing. Like it was awesome to just like be able to go and like walk down the street, and like there were no cars there, and you could just hang out with people, and there were restaurants. So yeah, I would hope that one of the lessons that we can learn out of the past 2 years, know that we're actually going to learn this lesson, but
No,
one of the things that I would hope for is more walkable cities, more community oriented cities.
it. I've like I said, I've been on both sides of this argument just because like living in a city, you often think about it'd be great to be like a walkable city. Like we could totally shut down all individual use vehicular traffic from like South
Mhm.
Street to Spring Garden and from river to river and not
Mhm.
lose anything. Like there's no
Mhm.
reason anybody needs to like actually drive there.
Right,
Make exceptions for like I need to go pick up stuff from my office, or deliveries or
right, 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 right,
trash trucks, whatever. But
right.
there's a way to do this. Cities have done it. Um, Pretty famously, Madrid recently turned a lot of various of their various squares, and Madrid's kind of built to be a walkable city in the first place, but
Mhm.
um, turned a lot of the larger structures into like no vehicles inside of them. Um, but all over Spain, it's kind of like that anyway, just because the streets are even more narrow than here and are more designed for horses, humans, and carts. Um, but yeah, there's whole sections of cities in Spain that are like you can't get into that section with a personal vehicle. You just have to walk. You can drive a tuk tuk up there to deliver something, but you can't like
Mhm.
drive a car.
I
Um,
feel like we need like a trial. You know what I mean? We need like a month or something for people just to be able to try it out. Like the city just needs to be like, all right, listen, y'all. We're gonna try this out for a month. We'll
I
see
mean,
how we all feel about it.
Or but we're never gonna do that in Philly. Like I love the idea. I love the energy. We're just never going to do it. Like we can't even get a mayor that wants to spend his whole term actually doing something. Um, that brings up the special elections. Philadelphia decided on special elections. Initially, they were only going to, so in Philadelphia, you have to resign to run. I think that's a good policy. Resign your current position in order to run for another position. We have several, four city council members who are running for mayor. So they have all resigned. And there could still be more resignations. You don't have to resign at any particular time. You just have to resign in order to run for another office. Um, so count the way the rules are on that is the council president decides when those members are going to be replaced, unless there's another general election, at which point those offices, if they're on the ballot, are replaced automatically. Council President Darrell Clark had initially decided to only replace the folks who had specific districts, the two council members who were district council members, and has since decided that because he doesn't have the votes to override enough members, so that's another weird thing about Philadelphia City Council. Um, our veto override of the mayor's office is not based on percentage. It's based on number of members voting for something. So you have to have 12 people vote for a measure to make it law, if the mayor doesn't want it to be law. Um, because a bill was released and the mayor vetoed it, Council President Clark realized that the mayor is still willing to block stuff that he doesn't like. And so the council president announced that all of the empty council member seats would be in the next election, which is coming up on November. These elections are not permanent elections. They're not like regular elections. The council people will serve until the end of the term of the council people that they're replacing. And there is no primary. There's no regular vote to determine who these candidates are. They're all chosen by the ward leaders, the ward leader system, which I despise, but anyway. um, so through the ward leader system, the candidates will be chosen. There are some interesting candidates for council. Uh, a fellow who recently gained notoriety by being a trash man, your favorite trash man on Twitter. I'm looking up his name because I forget it. Um, anyway, he's running for at large, and I can't find his actual name. I'll find it eventually. Anyway, he's running for at-large city council. He has some interesting ideas. Nothing really outside the box. Uh, but he's a popular candidate. Um, I don't know. What do you think about the special elections, about the folks who resigned, etc.?
Yeah. Um, well, I will start by saying that like the Cannonball Festival has taken up most of my brain space for the past, 6 months as we've been getting ready. And this is actually, I'm wearing our t-shirt right now.
Nice.
We have a cluck around and find out.
Mm-hmm.
A rooster is our mascot because reasons. So I haven't been able to follow everything step by step for these changes. I think what I would say is
Terrell Hagler is the man who I'm talking about, by the way.
I think what I would say is so I live up in Mount Airy, and we moved there from Fishtown in 2020. It's sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, and there are lots of folks on our block now in Mount Airy who are super involved, and it's great to feel a part of a. It's great to feel part of a block, part of a community. Whereas we didn't really feel that way when we were in Fishtown. The and for lots of reasons that I can get into. But I think what I would say is like for anyone who's running, and one of my question to you, James, my question back to you is going to be like, what is it that you would think that could transform Philadelphia in a way that you would want to see? And so what I would say about these candidates is like, I want to see people who are bold, honestly. I'm not really looking for middle of the road. I'm not looking for
I think
moderation.
that's I
So,
think
you know
that's
what I
the
mean?
lesson of the pandemic and of the George Floyd protests and politics in general and elections in general after really after Obama.
Mhm.
Like I think that's the mistake that political analysts are constantly making. Political wonks who work in DC, who work at the national level, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but I do have a friend-ish an acquaintance who I've worked with.
Trendish.
Well, I mean, like he's a guy I've
Yeah,
worked
yeah,
with.
yeah,
He's
yeah. I get
he's
it.
in the arts. He does a lot of advocacy around the arts. He does a lot of work in the arts and politics space. At the same time, I tried and get him involved in some local stuff, and um, he was like, "Nah, the stuff I'm working on is too big, and I'm too busy." And I'm
Mhm.
like, like I get that. At the same time, I get burnout. I have burnout. Like I'm involved in a lot of things local politics wise that I just don't have time for. Um, Not that they're not important, but the message that I get when I interact with people who work on a national level, especially with like the DNC and the RNC, with the major parties, is that their headspace is over here, whereas and they're like galaxy braining everything. And for those that don't understand the term
Yeah, yeah,
galaxy
yeah,
brain,
yeah,
it comes from a meme, etc. Um, but they're kind of like galaxy braining everything, and like they think that they know.
yeah.
But what politics is showing, what local elections is showing, and what even national elections is showing that they're not learning, is that people don't care as much about what position somebody represents as long as they represent it with a lot of passion. Um, because the more passion candidates have, it seems like they can sell their constituency on anything. Um,
Well, because I think we're so hungry for leadership right now in our country, and like like real leadership. And um I would blame this. I don't know. I'm gonna get on a soapbox about something if it's okay. But
yeah,
I
go
think I,
ahead.
I think I would blame the rise of Trump and all of our fascists that we have now on, among other things. I think the failure of honestly like Hollywood and Broadway to like offer enduring, meaningful myths about our country, ones that people can like buy into and can believe. Like we don't have I think strong stories that reflect the kinds of values I think that like we want to be able to have as a country, as a people, that are going to take us out of like the past several hundred years of really not operating for everyone and moving us forward to a place where we actually moving us towards, fully automated luxury gay space communism, right? Like how can we, like we don't really have strong myths from our two biggest sort of like cultural institutions, right? These things that not only lead our country but lead the world in terms of storytelling, and we don't. I I just don't see them coming out of either of those institutions.
Well, oh, to your point, the myths that we created in the 60s, 70s, 80s gave way to mostly propaganda in the 90s and early 2000s. Like it just became a propaganda machine for like basically fascism. So like really we're just reaping what we sowed, but like everything in the late 80s through the early 2000s was some sort of propaganda or propaganda for the military industrial complex. Like even now we
Like
still have
RoboCop,
like,
right?
huh?
Like RoboCop,
Yeah, like,
like we had like, or I'm a huge like sci-fi fan, and so when you go back and you like look at like the sci-fi of the 80s, right? It's all of this very like Cold War, sort of like anti-Russian, like pro-force, like this idea of like strength, right? Like all that stuff in the 80s, and then in the 90s, you do start to get some really great like um like sun punk, or like what is the word that I'm looking for? It's more like green, more like environmentally based.
mm-hmm.
Sun punk, you start to get more of that in the 90s as like you're shifting away from that stuff. But it's still like not there. I mean, we still have a lot of really dark sci-fi these days. You like look at the success of Black Mirror, right? We're still really obsessed with things being dark because it somehow validates where we are now. And that can feel really good, I think, for a period of time. But I think what I'm hoping for out of stories that we tell each other, and what I'm hoping for out of leaders is to see, okay, but where can we go and how do we get
Well,
there? Because we,
and I think that's why Obama was such a popular candidate. Not
Mhm,
because of any particular position he represented, or because he was black or anything. Just because like his campaign messaging was all about future looking and what can be.
mhm.
Then you get to Trump, and the reason why Trump won over Clinton is because, again, Trump's campaign messaging, whether it was true or not, you're selling people on like this kind of idea, like in the future we can make America great again. Um, it's
Yeah, I
hope
hear
and
that.
change, but a little bit more fascist.
Oh yeah, like it was such a shame too. I have this image in my head permanently embedded of Hillary Clinton. She's like at some kind of rally, and I'm like, I really, like I want her to be doing well. I need us to like not like elect Trump. And there's this clip of her, and she's improvising. She's just speaking off the cuff. She's going off script, and she says, and we're going to bring good things back to America again. That is almost verbatim what she says. And I'm like, that's your selling point. We're going to bring good things back to America again.
I mean,
I was like, oh,
and so it's frustrating because like from the standpoint of somebody who spent like I've spent my entire life like kind of mired in advertising, in the advertising realm. My mother was in advertising. I've been in photography and advertising, and the like the side of the arts where if you're not selling yourself, you're not making any money. um but it's frustrating from that perspective to see that like that really is all that campaigns boil down to. um it really honestly does not matter to most of the electorate what position you represent. You could represent, purple monkeys on the moon, and we need to genetically alter monkeys to be purple furred, and then figure out a way to have a colony of them on the moon. And if you represent that as like your campaign position, that's how we're going to change the world and make America better and, like
Mhm.
provide all this hope and whatever, that, like that's what's going to win you the election. Like, it doesn't really matter that your position is nonsensical. Um,
Yeah, I'm really on like this idea of like advertising or selling a thing, and like just the difference. Oh wow, okay, so too many things in my brain, but I think about the idea of like advertising, purple furred monkeys, as you say, on the moon, like of that it's just a matter of selling it. You're selling a brand of a thing rather than necessarily like the ideas behind it or whatever. I've been listening nonstop. I don't know about you, but I've been listening nonstop to the new Beyonce album.
mm,
And the song Break My Soul, right? And she talks about how she's like leaving her 9 to 5. And I'm like, girl, you've never had a 9 to 5.
right,
Like you
right.
and but so much of Beyonce like is a brand, right? That she is selling, but like the music is fucking fire, right? Like the music is amazing and it does really connect with us on a sort of a different level. And I also think about there's that book, oh God, what's it called? It's like written by Sapiens. I think that's the name of the book, right? And like in it, he like talks about how like humans like are we only have like a capacity to really like connect with like 200 people or so. Like that's sort of like after that, like things just become too big for us to sort of comprehend. And so, and like in it, he talks about how corporations, like the idea of a corporation, the idea of a business or an organization, like starts to take it on its own life of its own after that. But so I think about, and then I'm going to keep going on this one. You'll follow me. Sort of the difference between like the macro and the micro universe too. That those things can sort of look similar, but they operate on different principles in a way. We don't really have like a unifying theory for those. And so anyway, so I say all this to say that I'm just really, yeah, I really love that tension of how do you, I think this is what I try to like get at a little bit in Manchin maybe, but of like, how do you sell an idea for something when the details are really what matter and what are really gonna affect people's day-to-day lives? Like those details really do matter, but those aren't necessarily sexy to sell, you know? So that I think, yeah, anyone kudos to your mom for being in advertising because I think that like that's a tough place to be in. Like, how do you figure out how to communicate the meat of something while also get people excited about it when maybe that meat isn't so exciting at first, or like maybe this is like the myth what I was saying before about like going back to those stories like in Hollywood or Broadway of what are the stories that we
Well, I
tell,
mean,
you
like
know?
all American history is advertising for the United
Hmm.
States. Like when I say
Hmm.
American in this context, I'm meaning the United States, and I try to get away from that, especially recently. But like that's a lot of what the pushback is. People have been sold this idea of the United States as the only way to do things, and the only way to do things and be successful. Um, and they've been sold it for 3 or 4 generations now, where, like we did have big enemies and bad ideas on the other side of the political spectrum, like or literally in other countries that were trying to attack us or trying to attack
Hmm.
people in general. And we did have we have had good ideas. We have had, you
Hmm.
know, the ideas of community and
Hmm.
freedom and protection for everyone. Um, and those ideas were part of, I mean, they're mythical as much as they are real. But we were sold those ideas, and then the pushback comes when you tell people who don't actually want to learn things that well, you were kind of sold a bill of goods, because yeah, it's true that we had good ideas, but the reality is never as rosy as what the myth is. There's that saying. I'm sorry, I have a fly that keeps flying into my eyes.
That's all right. You're doing great. If it makes you feeling better, I can't see it at all.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's just bothering me, so I look crazy on screen. But at any rate, but we had these great ideas, but the saying "don't meet your heroes" is true,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, a lot of people that are now in the stage of their life where they have a definite idea of their own history, like right, like as you grow up, you're like in your youth, you're developing kind of an idea of where you are and where you're from, and then in your teen years, you're kind of developing the ability to question those things, question your reality, question where you are and where you're from. And in your 20s, you're kind of like going along, like really, really analyzing, using those two skill sets against each other, and really figuring out, is this where I'm from? Is this what I've been doing? And then analyzing it, and also kind of deciding, what do I want to see in the future? What do I want? And then in your 30s, you're really on the path of, okay, this is what I want the future to be. But as you get more into, and maybe this isn't a universal experience, maybe this is just my experience, but as you get into your 30s, you're really getting into, okay, I've done all this analysis. I developed an idea of where I'm from. I analyzed what was true of that, and then now I'm in my 30s, and I've thought about where I want to go, and now I'm going to execute all that. But as you get more into the execution phase, I think kind of necessarily you lock down the origin story. You kind of go,
Mm.
okay, this is, as I execute these things, I really need a bedrock of where I'm coming from in order to be able to do what I want to do. Because like really, like if you're just constantly shifting what you know, constantly adjusting what you know, you're constantly having to relearn things and go through that whole process again. And for little things, we do that all the time. Yeah, uh, my cell phone bill has always been $70. Well, it's $79 this month. Why is it $79? So I can learn that change. Um, but you have a lot of people, and as you enter your 30s and 40s, you get into the positions where you control things, and you also have a very strong political voice, and you have children, you have a voice in business, you have a voice in consumerism. You get to this sudden stage where you're locking down that history. And then if somebody comes along and goes, "Oh, what you knew? Yeah, that's not right. Sorry. Yeah, actually, the United States has always been awful for Black people. It's always been awful for Puerto Ricans. It's always been awful to Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
not,
yeah.
like we're not magnanimous to our territories, and we've never treated them well. So." And you're breaking that myth. Well, yeah, people are going to push back. How do you break that myth without all the pushback? Without, like, how do you?
Oh, I mean, I don't think you can, but I don't, but that doesn't mean that it isn't worth it, I think like, I don't know, I was taking so many notes because I'm loving everything you're saying, and I have so many pieces of it that are like, in my brain now. And the first thing I think I would say is like, that's all Dolly Parton, right? Like Dolly Parton has that thing where she says, figure out who you are and then do it on purpose. And I love that. And I think that like that, yes, that's for me is like when, I'll be 35 in October. And I think when we got into my 30s, I think I did start to finally have that kind of perspective that you're talking about of like what is my origin story, that like I don't think I had realized that I had still been in my origin story or something up until that time. Like I think that there's such as pressure in your 20s to like, especially when you're like going off to college, to like figure out what it is that you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Right.
And I've worn so many different hats that that I'm like, how could I know? How could I've already failed because I haven't done the one thing for the rest of my life. I've worn all of these hats, and so I think part of that is that process of like figuring out who you are, and then yeah, I'm definitely feeling in my 30s now of like, and now I'm doing it on purpose,
Right.
and I really, really, I just love that as a framing. But I think you're totally right. Yeah, like how. when I think the issue with America is that we've gotten our origin story wrong, right? Is that and this is what you're alluding to, and what I think the goal of the 1619 project is, right? That we're like, no, we need to get right about what our origin story is, or else we're never going to be able to move forward. And I don't like there are people there's that wow, I'm about to see where we go with this one, but there's that episode of the Golden Girls where Blanche, is it? I think no, it's Rose. Who is it? Uh it's Blanche, and she there's this episode about the Confederate flag, right?
Mhm.
Where she's like, oh, it's just a symbol of family.
Right.
And there's another character who's like, no, it's not.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? But for her, like growing up in the South, like it was just like there at like family barbecues and picnics and like reminds her of her family. So it's when you tie it to all of these positive feelings, right, that people don't want to let go of it. So I think it is really difficult to start to um try to untangle those things. But like that's the hard work. And I think, as we Philadelphia is a majority minority city, and I think as a country, as we become a majority minority country, as we start to, I think of people less as minorities and more of people like as people of the global majority, right? And I think that like when we think about minorities in America, it's because it's like in this framework of American exceptionalism, that I think like when we can start to decenter whiteness, decenter white people, as sort of a default way of being, I think like that's the only way you're going to crack open and shift what we think that origin story is of our country. And so I don't know. To me, I guess I think I'm a little like we're still at the end of our 20s or something.
Well, I
Like we're
mean,
still.
really, we are a relatively young country from a
Mhm,
global perspective. I
mhm,
think it's interesting. Maybe so like this conversation is interesting from the perspective of if you think about it, like the people that are pushing and what conservatives would say, or like like white nationalists would say, is that we're pushing a false narrative, but the people that
mhm,
are pushing the narrative of actual history are the
mhm,
people who had the least invested in in America as exceptional, like, right? Because like
mhm, mhm,
you know you have a lot of black leaders and black educators who grew up in environments where the United States did not treat us well.
mhm, mhm,
And we're the ones going, okay, well, like it's great that, some people were treated really well, but this isn't the universal. This isn't like what happens to everyone. And so I find it interesting that and it's true across the board, like like the folks that most easily accept that there could be history that isn't being taught seem to be the people that are abused the most by the systems that exist. um uh so I find that interesting. I don't know, it's
Yeah, I
just a
would.
thought.
I'm thinking about you're reminding me of what's the book, so you want to talk about race, I'm blanking. I think it's Ijeoma Aluo, I think is maybe the author, right? And I she says in the beginning, if I remember correctly of it, she talks about how there are like three things that she's like, I want you to keep these three things in mind as you're like reading the rest of the book. And the first one is uh, when a person of color tells you that something that they experienced or something that you did to them was racist. Um, it was, period, end of sentence.
Right.
Like you don't get to dispute whether or not it was racist. It was. And I think actually that might be like number two, because I think the first one that she says is like, it's gonna be really important for you to like sit with your discomfort and you might disagree with things here, but it's actually really important for you to, and I was like, and I think reading that one, I was like, oh yeah, like working in the arts, like work as an actor, like you learn to get comfortable with discomfort. And then I read that next one where it's like anything that person of color says is racist is racist. I was like, well, hold on now. I was like, what do you mean by that? Like, isn't there some kind of like objective to, and I'm like, no. And like, and so then you go on to read the rest of the book. And I love, she gives this example of, that you're walking down the street and everyone that you're walking by is hitting you really forcefully, so that when someone else walks by, they might just tap you, but then you really blow up at that person because your experience has been this repeated aggression again and again. So even something that is not as big as something else is still an aggression, is still a hurt, is still painful. And so I think that there's a major issue in our country right now between folks who want to, see equality and improvement for everyone, and the folks who clearly don't want that, like our fascists, fascists here in this country. Like the call's coming from inside the house now, right?
The call
Like
is coming from inside the house. Speaking of, I want to talk about the impeachment thing a little bit.
Mm,
For those that don't know, the Pennsylvania Congress, Pennsylvania Congress people, state representatives and state senators have, state representatives at this point right now, have organized across the state of Pennsylvania to, and I still don't understand this, impeach Larry Krasner, the district attorney for the city of Philadelphia, who was elected by like a 70% majority by the citizens of the city of Philadelphia. So yeah, the call is coming from inside the house. There's not, there's the what I recently coined myself, which is probably not original, but what I recently called somebody, and this is being polite because it's true and at the same time accurate, is there are a body of anti-progressives. There's
mm,
anti-progress people. Um,
mhm,
Conservative isn't it. Conservatives are, like I hold some conservative positions. I hold to the ideas that, like, yeah, maybe it's buying into the mythos of the United States, but I hold to the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness being the most important and unalienable things in the world. Like that, literally, that these are rights that, people cannot be separated from. Human beings
mhm,
cannot be separated from.
mhm,
That's a
mhm,
conservative value. That's it's conservative in that I'm trying to conserve these thoughts that
mhm,
founded the country, or founded the current government, I should say. Um, at the same time, like there's you can be conservative and progressive at the same time. You can want to preserve those values and those thoughts, while at the same time understanding that the world progresses, things change, people change, technology changes. You have to approach them in new ways. Perhaps that laws that were written for people in the 1890s are not as applicable in the 1990s or the 2090s. Perhaps we need to move to in a different direction than those laws that were written, but still conserving the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as being inalienable rights. So these anti-progressive people don't like the idea that progressive people are pointing out, you know we've been trying to imprison our way out of crime for many, many generations in the United States. Even before the
right,
United States was the United States, we had
right,
prisons.
right, right.
Um, the prison system as currently designed is basically a legacy of Puritanism,
Mhm.
and the idea that if you take away all other inputs, somebody is going to self-examine and therefore improve themselves because they're going to think about what they've done.
Right. It's like it's penitence. It's
Yeah.
like it's religious, right? Like it's like Eastern State Penitentiary has had such a huge um role to play in like the shaping of how prisons are like in our country and around the world. And that was, yeah, like literally religious penitence.
Right. So that was a thought. We tried it.
Right.
We've
We've got
tried
to do
it
that
for
more.
like 300, 400 years now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It doesn't seem to be working. Like if prisons worked, the United States would be the safest country in the world because we have more per capita
Hmm.
prisoners, more
Hmm.
prisoners by percent of the population than literally any other country in the world, including like countries that we think of as evil for imprisoning people, like China.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
This thing you're saying about like conservative and progressive though, like I wonder if part of it is like that those words aren't useful to us anymore. I'm thinking about like the idea you're like, oh, it's a conservative idea that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is something for us to hold on to. But what you're at, but I think what we've been talking about today is like that not everyone enjoys those rights equally in our country, right?
right.
And it seems like a progressive idea to try to like open them up to other people, but but that shouldn't be radical, right? It should not be radical. And
And
I
it's
think
not. It's conservative.
right. Right. And I think when you frame it as like conservative or progressive, like I wonder what that does. I think people who are afraid of I work so my day job is that I work for the Wharton School of Business,
Mm,
and I'm working on a major project right now that has a lot of change management a part of it. And so when people perceive a change is happening or know a change is happening, right, that inspires a lot of like feelings of fear. How is it going to affect me? Am I going to lose my job? Blah, 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 blah. And same thing for the country. Like, am I going to lose what I love about my country if I start to give away rights to other people who don't have that right? Right. Like there's like this notion of it being pie somehow that you're gonna have like
right.
less pie.
There's basically two positions that politicians and people in general really take, both in the economy and in politics. And I always find this fascinating because I'm very I don't know why how I managed to become this person, but I've always been of the camp, the rising tide lifts all boats. When there
Mhm,
is more, there is more.
mhm,
When you put more out there, there's more out there to have. Or when you get more, it creates more. Like
yeah,
if your organization gets a grant, my organization is more likely to get a grant because if your organization does well with that grant, the people providing the grant are going to be like, "Oh, cool, this works," and they're going to give more money. So
yeah.
there's this concept of like finite economies,
Mhm.
and the alternate concept of economies powering themselves. Um,
Yeah, I think about there's that word for like the kind of design, and I'm blanking on what the word is, but it's like, when we started building cutouts in the sidewalk for people with wheelchairs. Oh my God, hello, friend. When we started building cutouts for people with wheelchairs, right, that it had a positive impact for people not using wheelchairs, for
right.
people like with strollers or deliveries or things like that. That like imagine if we were to actually build a society that was most beneficial, right, for the people who were least well off, everyone else would still benefit, right?
Right.
In other ways that we can't anticipate. But like imagine if we could do that. Like I don't think that the I think that like the challenges that we're experiencing in our country today come from a lack of imagination, not from a lack of anything else. And like you literally you just we can we get on board? Can we all imagine this together? Can we agree on a set of values? Don't talk to me about the practicalities of it. We'll figure out how to do it, because if we can all get on board with that this is how we want to move forward together, we will find a way to do
I
it.
mean, this is the same. I mean, it's the same conversation we started with the climate change conversation. Can we all get on board with just the
Yeah.
basic fact that carbon
Right.
dioxide raises the level of heat in the atmosphere, and we are experiencing climate change because of that extra energy that we dump into the
Hmm.
atmosphere every year? Great.
Hmm.
if we can get on board with that idea, like we're gonna come up with a solution. But we gotta get on board with that one simple idea first. Like, why can't? How are there still people that doubt this?
Yeah, you can't fix what isn't broken. And if you can't agree that something is broken, then you're not going to fix it.
um. So, rough segue. But also conservative. A conservative idea that I hold on to is that there is kind of a rule of law. Um, And
Hmm.
our former president, one Donald J. Trump, person number one, or whatever they called him in the FBI search until
Hmm.
recently,
Hmm.
um, is has I think he's made a big mistake, to be honest. There's a trial that basically his lawyers requested. So we all know that the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago, seized a bunch of documents, and brought them to FBI headquarters as part of an investigation into several things. What laws have been broken? Um, they had a ironclad, warrant to do that. They have been developing sources that certain laws were broken, and that's all fine. I think he made a mistake because he basically had his lawyers say, "Oh no, I want the documents back."
Right, right,
Well,
right, right.
first of all, now you've solidified the fact that you actually had the documents. Second of all, you moved this into civil court because you now became the plaintiff. You became the one complaining to the court, which means you have to prove your case, and in civil court you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Hmm.
Well, as part of this, he managed to get his case in front of a judge that he put in place,
Hmm.
who is unqualified according to the American legal system, and who has never sat as a trial judge until her appointment as a trial judge by Donald Trump. She is closely related to the Federalist Society, which has its own set of lawyers who believe in what I think is actually a radical version of U.S. law. Uh, so not really conservative. And in during that trial where he's demanding these documents back, like a 5-year-old who gets a toy taken away from them, or actually, I can now safely say a 1.5-year-old who gets a toy taken away from her. Um, we've had tantrums lately. The he asked for a special master. A special master is not a wild concept in this sort of case. A special master is somebody who is qualified to review documents and say, okay, this actually does belong to, is a private document that belongs to the plaintiff, or this is a document that doesn't belong to the plaintiff, and so is actually covered under this warrant. Dumb move. Like, really dumb move. Like,
Yeah.
because he's put himself in a position where he has to now explain how any document that has federal government stamping on it um, belongs to him.
Man, I wish we had so much more time to talk about this. I know we're coming to the end of our time. I think the thing that I just have in my brain is I'm really looking forward to seeing him in handcuffs. That's really like I'm just looking forward to the perp walk. I really
uh,
am. Like
why
I
hasn't it
just
happened already? Did you see the photo of him on the golf course with like 10
yeah.
other people or something?
This was oh my God, when I saw that, I was like, you utter idiots. Like talk about like revealing who all, ought to be investigated. Like you literally say to all of your all of your crony friends, all of your other criminal friends, hey, let's get together in a public place where we can be photographed and talk about what we're going to do. Great. Now I just have I already had a list before who I was going to investigate, but now I definitely have a list.
Now I know
Um,
who to.
right, right.
uh,
Now I know who's part of who's part of your racket for
and
sure,
Pillow Guy's phone getting seized.
Right,
There's
right. And
so
I'm just
much
like,
funny stuff that's been happening. Like
none of
funny,
these
like
people's
hilarious.
staffers, none of their staffers were like, maybe you shouldn't go to that. Like, no one could stop their, anyway. So yeah, I wish we had more time. But yeah, I'll just say I'm really looking forward to seeing him in handcuffs.
Yeah, me too. So just one last thing on Puerto
Mhm.
Rico. WHYY and Billy Penn reported or put up a link on how Philly can help with Hurricane Fiona relief for Puerto Rico. It is Puerto Rican Heritage Month.
Mm,
That started on I believe, the 14th, if I remember correctly. And so, if you even if you're not of Puerto Rican heritage, consider helping out. Folks do need the help. It would be nice. 15th, the 15th, first day of Hispanic Heritage Month. I don't know why it started on the 15th. Anyway, um, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and so honor those people who are part of our country and are treated as second-class citizens. Learn a little bit about what has caused Puerto Rico to be in the position it's in right now, which is it literally cannot, by law, fend for itself.
mhm.
And consider helping out with relief due to damage caused by Hurricane Fiona, and hooking up with organizations that have been vetted to provide services for people who are in need right now. By the way, a senator makes $174,000 per year. Um, not, not gonna buy you a Maserati and a yacht. I'm sorry.
No, well, but it's still like, a crazy amount of money for most people in this
It
country.
is a crazy amount of money for most people, and somebody somebody proposed that uh, senators and Congress people be limited by taxation to making the poverty line,
Mhm.
or just above the poverty line. Um, I think that's a great idea. If you,
Oh, I'm dead.
yeah, then you have people living at the level where most people do, or like link it to the median income in the United States, like
Right.
and then you have 100 people in the Senate and 500 people in Congress who are suddenly really understanding what it is to be the average person in America. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be
that would
nice?
be nice. I think it would be nice. It's just one of my progressive crazy ideas. Um, but yeah, really great conversation. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you joining me today. Any last thoughts? Anything to plug?
Just come on down to Man of La Mansion. We open tonight. We have 6 performances, September 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And then, so it's this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 26th, 27th, 28th. It's part of the Cannonball Festival. I'm one of the founding producers of the festival. Cannonball this year is 60 of the 180 shows in the Philadelphia Fringe Festival. We're a third of the festival. Over 300 performances under the Cannonball umbrella alone, between our 2 spaces at the Moss Building, and then 3 blocks down the street at Icebox Project Space. And we've been running since September 1st, and we go to the 30th. And I've just been incredibly humbled by all of the love and support and community that we've seen at the festival so far. Over 5,500 tickets have been purchased, and people have attended so far. So it's really quite amazing, I think, to see what our artists are pulling together. Um, and I hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And do go out to part of the Cannonball Festival, or at least part of it. It is an awesome festival. You guys are doing amazing work.
Thanks.
We, like we know a ton of the actors and stuff in the city, and a lot of us are working with you this year. So
Yeah.
thanks so much. Again, I'm gonna go to a one up of me. I'm gonna talk off the show. Feel free to hang out in the Zoom if you want. And I'm going to say bye to you now.
Hi, James.
Bye. Thanks again for everybody that tuned in. Really appreciate you guys joining us every week. We'll be back next Wednesday. Let's see if we have a guest confirmed for next Wednesday. Not yet, but we will have a guest. I believe I will be taking the month of October off, so next Wednesday will be the last show for about a month. We'll be back in November, but do tune in next Wednesday, the 28th, to check out what we have for you then. And, like and subscribe we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're even on Twitter, which is a good thing for me. I talk about politics a lot on Twitter, so feel free to subscribe to our Twitter feed. If you like what we do, feel free to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/lightbeefproductions. And yeah, hope you have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you next week, everybody.